You're listening to Badass Ladyfolk, a podcast about socially engaged women and non-binary femmes kicking buns big and small. I'm your host, Christine Sloan Stoddard. That intro music came from the song Talking Hands by Toxic Moxie. As previously mentioned, this is a reboot of my Radio Free Brooklyn show, The Badass Ladyfolk of Brooklyn. Now, Quail Bell Press and Productions is producing this podcast for and about incredible women and non-binary femmes from around the world, not just Brooklyn. This episode, my guest is actress Donna Morales. Welcome, Donna.
Hi, how are you? How's everything doing today? Good?
It's great. Yeah, we have beautiful weather. Finally, I feel spring is just about to come.
All right, well, you let me know because I'm staying down here in Florida until spring has definitely sprung.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Spring always. Yeah. Okay, well, when you come back to the New York area, I promise you, it's going to be beautiful. It better be. So I'm going to read the bio that we ran for Donna on a recent interview over at Quail Bell Magazine. Dear listeners, definitely check out that article. I will be posting the link in the show notes so that you can read it. Brooklyn born and Long Island raised, Donna Morales is a vivacious and versatile New York actress who started dancing at age 6. By age 17, she was dancing professionally and eventually transitioned to a career in education. First as the owner of a dance studio, and then as a teacher of early childhood education for the New York City Department of Education, DOE, for those who know it. After 25 years of service with the NYC DOE, she retired, but she never abandoned her love for the stage. At age 42, she began performing for regional theaters across Long Island and the outer boroughs, and became active in children's theater as well. More recently, she made her foray into Manhattan productions. Passionate about the performing arts of all kinds, Donna landed her first feature film role in 2018 and continues to act in TV, film, theater, and now voiceover projects. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to focus on Donna's work on Quail Bell's first ever audiobook, Naomi The Reckoning. I wrote and directed the audiobook. Donna narrated it beautifully, and my dear friend Denise Zenyep created the music. The audiobook is based off of the print book published by Finishing Line Press. Listeners, as always, I will drop the links in the show notes. So, Naomi The Reckoning is a novelette, and it follows this young woman named Naomi. She has a physical deformity. She's living in Richmond, Virginia. She struggles with body acceptance all her life. She comes from this very strict religious Catholic upbringing, and purity culture further complicated her relationship with her body, and now she's recently married and she can't find sexual satisfaction. The book opens with 5 narrative poems. You can actually hear those poems on a video we popped out on YouTube and Vimeo, etc. Donna narrated the poems just as she did with the rest of the book. And the rest of the book is this central story. It's a work of prose fiction. The total running time is 41 minutes, 26 seconds. Pretty good for a first time, Donna.
Thank you very much.
So what's the first thing you want to say about working on Naomi The Reckoning?
Well, when I was first introduced to the novelette, the prose and the hard copy, and I read through it and I said, oh my God, this is me. Naomi could be my alter ego. Everything about her is me.
Wow.
Except the name. Yeah. I don't know how you did that, but you just described my entire childhood and most of adulthood in this book.
Oh, well,
with the exception, I did not have the lip deformity, but I did have, and still do, have issues with body dysmorphia, and I had issues with weight. So, oh my goodness, this was me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I can't wait to dive into some of that in a bit. First, I want to get into some of the maybe the more technical aspects or artistic aspects that are not as personal, or maybe they are, but like, what are some of the things that go through an actor's head when they're looking at words on a page and thinking about how to bring them to life?
Well, you want to do justice to the story. You want to do justice to the writer. That's the first thing I do. I read it, and then I go through it again, and I look for the message. You know, anybody could just read a book. When you're voice acting, you've got so many different challenges because you've just got the intonation in your voice. You've got to let the reader feel through your voice, just as I'm speaking now to an audio audience on this podcast. You need to convey your message through your voice, and you can't use your body. You're not seeing facial expressions, and that it was a big challenge for me for the very first time out of the gate, because I am a very expressive actress, as you know, but to have to really discipline my body and just use the voice to make those words pop off the page. That was a big challenge.
So what sort of interpretation were you hoping to bring to Naomi and the Reckoning as you prepared for our recording sessions?
Well, I wanted to tell the story of a young lady who is just so confused, even from childhood. She asked the right questions, but because of culture and family beliefs and you know, things were taboo. They couldn't be spoken of. You know, let's just say her mother was, so she looked to her mother as a role model, but her mother wasn't there really as a role model.
Yeah.
So I wanted to convey that because again, it's very personal to me as well. So I felt for her. So I wanted to interpret her as a woman who, you know, she was just trying to navigate through her life, through puberty, through teenhood, through young adulthood, and you know, trying to figure out how in the hell did I end up here? Now what do I do?
Right. So could you talk about your voiceover training? Because you were a dancer and like
I was.
You
yes.
Body.
Body, exactly. Well, so now I can compare the two. Where in dance you don't use speech, but you convey through body expression. Well, voiceover, you're using your voice. And being an early childhood teacher really helped foster my voiceover acting, because I was in front of 4-year-olds all the time and I was reading to them every single day. So what was I reading to them? Your classics, you know, Three Billy Goats Gruff. I became the troll. I was the Three Billy Goats. I was Little Red Riding Hood. I was, you know, Goldilocks with the Three Bears. I voiced every single character for these children. Why? Because I worked with children who were non-English speaking. And so I needed to reach them, especially the child that was sitting in the back of the group that just was so shy because they couldn't speak the language. And so they'd be the child, you know, don't look at me. I'll look at the floor. If I look at the floor, the teacher's not going to look at me. And she will call on me. And I felt that, and I knew that. And so in order to gain their audience, I had to be silly. So I learned how to do all of these silly voices and train my voice. And also I do a lot of dialects and accents. Why? Because I worked with various cultures throughout my career. So I worked with Russian children. I worked with Asian children. I worked with Jamaican children. I picked up all types of dialects simply by listening to the kids and working with their parents. So I kind of learned it just by working with these cultures.
Yeah, and I'm sure that when you were going over rules or cultural norms for the classroom that
Mhm.
weren't necessarily familiar with to the children, that was a chance for you to be serious too, right?
Yes, it was. It was. But when I was working, I used to keep my door closed. And I felt my door was closed. It was my space, and it was a safe space. You know,
Yeah.
and I wanted it to be a safe space for these kids as well, where they can take chances. And that's what early childhood should be all about, taking chances and being in a safe space and being silly, being a kid.
Yeah.
So in order for them to let go and be a child within the norms, you know, there were rules, you know, we had to play nice with each other. We couldn't hit each other over the head with blocks and, you know, take the crayons and break them. You know, we had to convey those rules too. But at least these kids knew they were in a safe space, and the person who may not speak their language was someone they can build a trust with.
Yeah. So one of the reasons, and you already started to mention it, I'm so glad. One of the reasons why I cast you for this role was that I knew that you would have a lot of empathy for Naomi's character.
Yeah.
Most of my peers, friends, acquaintances, just people in my broader social and professional circles are very progressive. I identify that way too. Maybe not quite as progressive as some of them, but definitely on that side of that spectrum, of the spectrum. And along with that line of thinking comes a lot of sex positivity. Again, it's not necessarily how I was raised, it's just
Right.
that is what people talk about in my social circles now. But sometimes that positivity doesn't involve a lot of critical thinking. And my
Yeah.
biggest disappointment is also just how little empathy there can be for women who are trying to break free from conservative upbringing and embrace their sexuality. It's like I often encountered this total lack of understanding for why a woman would struggle with that. Like the shift should be automatic. If she has brain cells, if she has courage, forget what
Yeah.
her parents said, forget what the priest said, the teacher said, whatever. So I don't like that lack of empathy. It's not fair. It's hard to make
No,
change.
it's not. It is hard to me now. There's definitely a little bit of a generation gap between you and me. I am a baby boomer, uh, a young baby boomer, but a baby boomer nonetheless. And I grew up in a strict Sicilian household, where you didn't have sex till you got married. You had to have chaperones when you dated. I didn't have to have a chaperone per se, but you know, my mother was always looking out the window. My father was always there with the, you know, giving the third degree on basically every guy I brought home. And, you know, it was difficult. Um, I can remember being engaged during my first marriage, to my then husband. And I said to my parents, I want to go away for the weekend. I'm going away for the weekend with my fiance. And they're like, no, you're not. Well, why not? And I was young. I was 19. And I have a ring on my finger. I mean, I don't understand. Anything that I could do there or going away for the weekend, I could do here or maybe have been doing all along. You know, it was, you know, I just couldn't understand that mentality. And it, because of that, it it didn't allow, it led to a lot of missteps, a lot of missteps with regard to who I was as a woman and what my role was. And even after I got married, you know, your role, you get married, you have a family, you know, the reasons for getting married back then were so different than getting married now. You know, it wasn't really about partnership. It was about blending of families to make more of a family. It, how you were treated before you were married was so different how you were treated after you were married, including sex.
Yeah.
Okay. Women did not initiate, or at least not the ones I knew. It was always the husband who initiated.
Yeah.
And again, once you had children, you were looked at differently. You weren't looked at as a sexual object anymore in certain cases. I'm not going to say everybody, but I'm saying in certain cases, you were not looked at sexually in that way because now you're a mother.
Right.
But you're a mother, but you're still a woman and you still have urges and you still have needs.
Right.
So that's where the missteps come in and the miscommunications come in. Because now, back then, not so much now, I don't know. That's where the roles kind of change a little bit because now you're a wife and you're a mother. And your husband may or may not look at you the same way they did before you were married, sexually. And that leads to other things, such as affairs and so you've got the wife and the mother that's, you're keeping house and raising my children.
Right.
And then there's the other life outside the home on the husband's part that unfortunately too many women suffer from, having been victims of their spouses being, having infidelity, and it's terrible, and that was another thing that happened to me. So I'm speaking on that one. And women are sexual beings. We all are. I just learned it too late. I didn't discover, and again, that's what led to other problems, body image. I was always thin because I danced, and then when I had kids, I gained weight, and then once you get married, you're gaining weight when there's kids and family, and you're always cooking and you're always eating, and you're not as active in the way you used to be, and sometimes it just leads you to give up. So because I had those body image problems later on after I had my kids, I didn't feel as sexual. Even though I didn't feel pretty anymore.
Yeah.
Attractive anymore, but I was, and I just wanted my husband to look at me in the same way he did before we were married, before children, when we were dating, when he was excited. And it didn't happen. And all of my relationships going forward from there, my divorce, really the marriage kind of, not only the marriage, but my upbringing imprinted, my marriage imprinted, that it made me be like, oh, no, I don't do this. No, it made me very hesitant to want to enter into relationships or sexual relationships with men as a result of that, because I felt either I wasn't good enough or, I just was afraid of it, and then talking about pleasure a little bit.
Yeah.
Nobody talked about that. I never knew, and I'm sharing this with everybody's going to hear it. I didn't know what an orgasm felt like.
Yeah.
Until after my second marriage.
Ooh.
Well, I'm going to tell you why, because, I didn't really understand, everybody talked about this thing, but I'm like, I don't know. Okay. Maybe, and then there's the classic, the guy says, was it good for you? Did you, I'm like, yeah. Because what am I supposed to say? No, I didn't know what I was,
Yeah.
It wasn't like the movies, portrayed it. Not in my case anyway, but I guess I was a good actor there too.
Yeah, you really have been acting your whole life.
Yes, well, not lately, thank God. I kind of caught up a little bit. But so Naomi was the same way, only she rebelled after her marriage. She took the bull by the horns, so to speak, and said, this is what I want.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I wanted because I didn't know what it was to want.
Right. Well, I was going to say, I think there is this huge generational misconception that a lot of millennials think or assume that baby boomers were all hippies and they were having sex all the time with a bunch of different people, and it was just pleasure everywhere, and that now our generation is so sexually repressed because we're on the internet all the time. And even before the pandemic, we weren't sleeping around as much as the previous generation because, well, we were just on the internet. But it's not true. I mean, the hippies were just one group of a generation, and that attitude really didn't affect everyone in a whole generation.
No, it's definitely not me. And like I said, I was a late baby boomer.
Yeah.
So I didn't grow up a hippie. I basically was a child of the 70s.
Yeah.
I was born in 61, but really a child of the late 60s and 70s but I remember looking at my brother, and he's 11 years older than I, and I kind of observed what he did, and yeah, the hippie image and the footloose and fancy free, sexual, creativity, I like to call it, smoking pot and just being totally free.
He was a boy. It was always going to be different, right? Especially in a Sicilian Catholic household. It was always going to be different for him.
Yes. And it was things that he was never questioned for, ever, by my father or my mother. It was total opposite. It was a total opposite in my life. And I found myself resenting my parents for that. I'm like, what? But they never explained to me. It's because the sexual differences. I didn't know. I just thought, okay, he's older, but now I'm his age. He's 11 years older. And now I'm his age, and I want to experience the same things he did when he was this age. And you're saying no. Why? I was rebellious too. But, after a while, I just kind of gave up.
Yeah.
I did, so rebellious that was the reason why I basically did get married at a young age. And I ended up learning that I jumped from the frying pan into the fire, because nobody really ever sat me down and said, okay, yes, marriage is this, this, and this. I mean, I'm not expecting my mother to sit down and have a talk with me about sex. I already knew about it. I just didn't know about it to the extent where, I could ask for what I want, and I can assert myself as a woman, and I could be sexual. Right. And had I known all of that, maybe things would have turned out a little bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, with Naomi, her mother just explains sex as something that you do to make babies, and something that you do within marriage. And I think even today, and even with many millennials, that whether they came from a religious background or not, many girls learn that's the purpose of sex, to make babies. Or that is all that they learn about sex, like just the mechanics of this is how one gets pregnant.
Right.
This is how one does not get pregnant.
It's all very clinical.
Yeah.
It's all very, sex is, well, let me tell you, I have 2 girls, and I think God blessed me with 2 girls as a result of that. I was never, and I am never like that with my daughters. I am, something, I'm glad I wasn't. I told them everything they needed to know. And I didn't let them feel ashamed. I knew that I wanted to be that mom where they can come to me, and they did. And they shared a lot with me, sometimes too much. Sometimes I wasn't, but something, it made me feel empowered as a mom that I did the right thing by my girls by saying, if you're ever in this situation and you feel uncomfortable, you let me know. If you have questions, let me know. They had their first periods. I was there, but I let them know why they were, okay, I explained to them the clinical part. And then I explained to them the other part of it, that, hey, this is something that only a woman can do, and you should be so proud of it. Right. I mean, one of these days you're going to make me a grandmother. I mean, it's you're going to make me a grandmother, but you don't have to if you don't want to, because your body is just so precious that it does these things, and it can feel these things, and don't ever be ashamed of it the way I was, and they're not, and it's great. grew up very, very, with a great sense of mental health and a great feeling about their sexuality. They're beautiful girls. They don't hold back. They do share with me. They're very confident where I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
My daughters are extremely confident women, and I'm so proud of them. And I have to say that I'm proud of myself too for doing that for them, because that's something I never got.
Yeah, and it must be very hard to raise your children differently than you were raised. I'm not a mother,
Yeah.
but it's something that I think about. How do we break from some of these patterns? There are some things we might want to preserve, but other things we're like, nope, got to do that differently.
Well, something, I did raise them basically with the certain cultural norms and, religious norms that I grew up with. I raised them Catholic, but do they follow Catholicism now? Loosely, or if not at all. But that's okay. They're adults. They can make up their own minds. But I gave that to them. I sent them to Catholic school, so they would have their sacraments in, and, again, I gave them that. And for the simple fact that I feel that every child needs religion or some form of religion, but later on down the road, that can change because it's up to them.
Yeah.
And they can form their own ideas, but I gave that to them. I gave them a sense of independence because I was a single mom for a while. I gave them a sense of independence because I had to, at certain points, let them be latchkey kids, because I was going out, earning my master's degree, and I was working. So they came home to the neighbor letting them in, and, so they had that independence. And I taught them, you have to get your homework done. This is what you need to do. All right. You need to get the homework done. You need to make sure that, the table is set so when I come home, I can get dinner on the table. There were rules, but I allowed them that independence that I was not allowed. And I let them make their own choices, whether they were good or bad. And when they weren't so good, we sat down and had a conversation, but at least I let them make mistakes. Yeah. And I didn't persecute them for their mistakes and make them feel less of a person because of those mistakes. Where I was chastised, I was punished. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and growing up the mother of two young girls is not easy. Oh my goodness, if we had a longer podcast, I'd tell you stories.
Okay, so I loved all those points you were saying about raising your daughters with confidence and the ability to choose, to be independent, and giving them a foundation in religion, but letting them, again, make choices later on as adults. And when I was writing Naomi's character, I was thinking about people I knew who came from very strict religious backgrounds and how difficult it was for them to finish high school, because for many of them that was the point where they could choose. Well, not the potential to make a choice was there.
Exactly.
Are they going to continue observing this religion in such a strict, literal way, or are they going to interpret things on their own? Are they going to maybe just completely break away from it? And, all of that, like we've been saying, all of that has consequences for women and their relationship with their bodies in ways that just don't exist for men. Really in any religion.
Right, exactly. Not only does it affect them in ways that they view their own bodies, but it also affects how they relate to men and how men relate, how they allow men to relate to them. Mm-hmm. Very important.
Right. Yeah, because it's not just about sex. I mean, consent and being assertive, speaking up for yourself, those things impact every part of life, not just sex. And if you can't speak up to your husband about something in the kitchen, or about money, or about how you're going to raise the kids, how are you supposed to do it in the bedroom?
Well,
it's even more taboo.
Well, that's what I encountered as a young wife and mother. I was always told what the norm was and what I had to do and what I should do. I was never told, what do you want to do? I knew what I wanted to do, but and that's where I was rebellious. But believe it or not, my father said something to me, finally, after I had my second daughter and my marriage was kind of going south at the time. And I was barely keeping my head above water and trying my best to raise these kids and figure out what's my next step going to be. And my father actually sat me down and said, I didn't want to say this before, but I'm going to say it to you now. He said, because I would have said it to you before, it probably would have affected our relationship. He says, I never wanted you to depend on a man so much that you lost all sight of yourself. And I never thought I'd ever hear those words coming from my father's mouth, ever. Right. He had become more progressive. And I didn't even know this. But he had said to me, never depend on a man. You depend on nobody else but yourself. But he said to me, you kind of got lost here. He goes, go back and find yourself. And that's when I did. That's when I got myself back into college. I had to give up my studio, but I got myself back into school. And I found a new career that gave me back a sense of who I was. And, I could do this. I'm not just a wife and a mother, and now I'm going to be a divorcee. I am a teacher. I am a mom. I am many things in life. Being divorced did not define me. And that's what I thought happened. I thought that, now I've got this, stamp on me. I'm divorced with 2 kids. Who's going to want me? Yeah. Oh. Yeah. That went, yep. But getting myself out into the world, going back to school, earning my master's degree in education, raising those kids, keeping the house above the roof above our head, finally landing a job with the DOE, it all fell into place. And I found who I was. And I wasn't just a wife and a mother or a divorced woman. I was somebody who made a difference in the world and into 36 little faces every single day.
36?
Well, it was 2 sessions, 18 and 18, morning session, afternoon session.
I was about to say, no, I know the public schools can get crowded, but 36.
No, pre-K. I taught pre-K. So there were 18 in the morning and 18 in the afternoon.
Got it.
But I made a difference. I finally made a difference. And because I was able to explore that and find that career and make something of it that was very successful, I was able to not only help myself, but help, my students, help my kids. It was, like a light bulb went off.
Yeah. Before that, you were making a difference with your girls. You were shaping your daughters. It seems like you were not allowed to be aware of that and allowed to be aware of your own strength and your ability to be independent and maybe one day have a career if you wanted it, which clearly you did.
Yeah. And that basically was one of the reasons why the marriage had failed, was because I was finding success. I wanted to be independent. I wanted to be a wife and I wanted to be a mom, but I didn't want to lose sense of who Donna was. And in fact, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And because of that, I lost everything else. But I had to find myself back. And it wasn't until, my dad sat me down, after my divorce and said, get yourself back in school. I'll help you. Go find yourself and do something. He goes, you've got 2 kids to raise. So I did it.
Yeah.
I did it. It was all on my own. And I was a single mom for 5 years before I remarried. And let me tell you, it felt so good to have that time to myself and just find out who Donna really was and who I was maybe meant to be. It was great. It really was great. And all of those experiences have led me to where I am today.
Yeah, I mean, just having lived these different lives, you bring a
Yeah.
lot of empathy and firsthand knowledge and
Yeah.
experience to different kinds of characters.
Yeah. Yeah. um, Naomi was near and dear to me, and I'm so proud of Naomi. I am. Because I'm proud of her because again, she took the bull by the horns and she said, this is what I want. I mean, even in the book, she says, looking at herself in the mirror and like, am I doomed to have painful, horrible, awkward sex for the rest of my life?
Yeah.
She knew better. She knew better. She knew that that's not what she wanted. She experienced it, and she was able to go, okay, okay, all right, I'm your wife now. We're married, but don't think that this is just going to be, vanilla.
Well, and
I'm not going to eat vanilla for the rest of this marriage, or it's not going to be here.
well, I credit the character for, as you said, taking the bull by the horns,
Yeah.
because I think it's one thing to identify a problem, and that
Right.
enough can be really hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to actually try and take action, to read, to try and have conversation, whatever. It doesn't even have to be about sex and marriage.
Right.
Anything, making any kind of change and actually doing it, like you actually going to school, getting that
Right.
master's, all
Yeah.
that can be so hard.
It was. And in hindsight, I said to myself several times, I said, this is my kids, maybe I should have done this and not married your father. But then again, I said, if I didn't marry your father, you wouldn't be here. So there was a reason for that as well.
Yeah.
Naomi was lucky because she went on that trip, and that's where she met her husband.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even go away on a ski trip when I was engaged. Here she was, in a foreign country. So good for her. Good for her. Seriously, that was progressive. That's great. I mean, yeah, she had that. She was able to experience her independence. So I think that's being able to experience that independence allowed her to be able to express herself as an independent person, not just as a woman, but as an independent person, expressing her needs.
Yeah.
Yes, I am your wife, but I need this from you, and you need to listen. Rather than, it's going to be okay, dear. I'll be okay. Are you all right? I'll take care of you. She didn't want it. She didn't want that. She did not want that at all. She just wanted to be heard because her mother had shut her down all those years. And even her own sister fooled around behind her back.
It's so painful in a particular way when other women betray you.
Yeah, and it's her sister.
Your female friends. Like, really, girl?
Exactly. And I think that's how she felt. She felt so betrayed. And I have a brother 11 years older than and I always felt betrayed because why is it was okay for him and not for me? Nobody ever sat me down and explained the difference.
Yeah.
And therefore I did not see a difference. I couldn't understand. Nobody ever said to me, well, you're a girl, you're going to go into a woman, he's a guy, and this is what guys do. That didn't exist.
It's amazing how even as young children, though, kids often notice. They can't explain why, but they know, well, the boys are being treated this way and they get to do this, and the girls are treated this way and they get to do that.
Yep.
And some of them ask how come.
Yeah.
It's, well, how come he gets to be a superhero, or how come he gets to play with the fire truck, or how come he gets to be on the football team?
And in my classroom, everything was open to everyone. I had boys in the doll corner. I had girls with construction hats on, building the skyscrapers in the block corner. There were no defined sexual roles in my classroom. It was all bets were off. You explore what you want to explore.
Yeah, that's something that I hear a lot from young parents is, well, how am I supposed to teach a tiny child about consent, about accepting their body, about relating to other sexes. Like what are some of the ways that you try to teach those lessons in an age appropriate manner with your students or your own daughters?
Well, with my students, it was a lot of modeling, modeling mutual respect. I dealt with a lot of children who came from shelters and who saw a lot of disrespect within their environment, where their moms were being abused. And their tiny eyes were just exposed to so much dysfunction at such an early age. And they would bring that into the classroom with them. And I saw it. And when I saw, aggression, especially male aggression on women, I'd had boys come in, turning chairs and tables, taking blocks and hauling them. And I'm like, no.
And these were 4-year-olds.
These were 4-year-olds. But
turning tables.
This is what they were exposed to.
Right.
So I had a safe space, and I had to let them know this is not a thing that happens all over the place. What you're experiencing is not everywhere, and you can't carry that from your home here. Here is a safe space. Here is a fun. We're in a happy place. We smile. This is a happy place. Sometimes there's no crying. This is a happy place. We've got puppets and dolls and songs, and we're dancing and singing. We have snack time and nap time. It's a happy place. It's amazing what baggage these little 3.5, 4-year-olds come in with. And they don't know any better because that's what they're exposed to. And so my rules were that first and foremost, we respect each other. And I always used to do something with them. I know nobody can see what I'm doing right now, but I used to have them do this. We keep our hands to ourselves.
Okay, so you reach
your mind, pushing my hands out, wiggling my fingers, keep our hands to ourselves.
Cross them.
Yes,
your heart.
Our hands to ourselves. And, we use our hands for helping, not hurting. Hands are for helping, not for hurting. We can help our neighbor clean up. We can help our neighbor carry a tray. We can help our neighbor tie a shoe, but we cannot hurt our neighbor. And that is what I conveyed in my classroom to my students.
Yeah, I think, that's perfect. Just the simple idea of you don't touch somebody who doesn't want to be touched,
Exactly.
And that goes into these sexual relationships too. Like, don't touch people. And if you are given consent, then touch in a pleasurable way.
Yes, exactly. And with little children are very innocent. They don't see the differences in sex.
Of course.
Because, they would go into the, students would go into the bathroom, together. And I have to say to them, well, we have to give each other privacy. So girls need their privacy and boys need their privacy, and I wouldn't go beyond that. I would just say privacy is important. It's special to the girls and it's special to the boys. So we don't share the bathroom. That's one thing we don't share. We share everything else in here, but we cannot share a bathroom. I had to lay those rules down too. So if you do it in a positive way and you communicate in a loving, positive, supportive and non-threatening way, you'd be surprised what you can reap. It's wonderful to see. But, I had to learn that as an adult being with these children, because growing up, it was always, you're gonna do this and you have to no, no word. I learned the word no very well. So Naomi, good for her. Yeah, I empathize with this chick. She's good. She's going to be good. And now you're going to write Naomi too. Yeah, come on. Her journey, Naomi's journey is not finished. You left it. I'm not even going to, I don't want to spoil it, but her journey's not done.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Her journey's not done.
Well, okay, so when
I just gave you an idea, didn't I?
well, what I was gonna say is that when I think of how to really boil down the story, I often creative writing instructors or books will ask, what does the character want? Just a
Mhm.
simple, and you have to be able to answer it with one phrase. And I would say that what she wants is pleasure.
Yes.
Uh, so do you agree, disagree? Would you sum it up maybe a different way, use a different word or phrase to complete that sentence?
No, she wants what every human being who has warm blood running through their veins wants. Everyone wants pleasure. With pleasure, it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual pleasure,
Yeah.
but everyone wants pleasure of some kind. You know, it's people derive pleasure from many different things. For her, she wanted sexual pleasure because she knew it was there, and she wasn't ready or willing to settle for less.
Yeah.
And that's, no, I'd say pleasure. She,
Well, I think a lot of women have this hang up that we have to earn pleasure, like we have to deserve it. Like maybe we're not pretty enough, or maybe we're too fat, or we have a disability, or we're too old,
well,
or
yeah, okay.
pregnant,
Uh-huh.
right? So that, yeah, no, I mean, I admire her for wanting that and trying to go after it. I think what holds so many of us back is just these different societal hangups, just
Yeah,
things we've been raised with, right?
yeah, yeah.
Or social
Oh,
pressures from elsewhere.
exactly. Oh, you can't wear a bikini. You're too fat.
Yeah.
Who said so? Look at these plus size women in lingerie. They're gorgeous. But
Yeah.
at one point when I was plus size, I would I would pile on the clothes and wear all the big things to hide myself, and people looked at me differently.
Yeah.
People looked at me differently when I was 100 pounds heavier than I am now. When I came back after I lost the weight, people were like, wow, look at you. And they wouldn't say to me, and this is what I always said, I always noticed that people wouldn't say to me, Donna, you look beautiful. How beautiful you look. They'd be like, wow, you lost a lot of weight.
Ugh.
Mm-hmm. I kid you not. And they still say that. I don't know if it's just because they don't have anything else to say. Maybe it's just ignorance. Yes, I did lose a lot of weight, but I know I lost a lot of weight. Okay. It's obvious you could see it, but I don't take you lost a lot of weight as a compliment. I take,
Right.
wow, you've blossomed into, you look, what a butterfly. You look gorgeous. Not that you didn't look gorgeous before, but I love that you had the courage to do what you did, and good for you. And you're beautiful. You always were beautiful, but look at this. And you're a role model for other women who are overweight or obese, and they can look and see it can be done. That's what I'd rather have somebody tell me rather than, wow, you lost a lot of weight. And even the way men looked at me as well. When I was heavier, they did not take me seriously. They belittled me.
Mm.
Um, it made me feel unattractive. And I knew I wasn't the most attractive. I mean, I always had a pretty face, yes. It was heavier, yes, but I didn't feel like I belonged.
Yeah.
Even as an actress, I was not offered when I was doing theater, regional theater. I took myself off the stage for 2 years.
Wow.
2 years to get myself the way I am now, to work on my body, because I couldn't, well, physically it was hard for me because I was heavier and I was having knee issues and all kinds of physical problems. But because I felt so, even though I was large, I felt so small. I really
Right.
did.
Because of how people made you feel.
Yep. I became so not confident, and I've always been confident, but I became the least confident person. I would I was never shy. I became shy. I would walk in to rehearsals. I'd go in the back. I'd sit down. I was quiet. I would just do what I had to do. I wouldn't interact because I just didn't feel good about myself. I was very self-conscious that people weren't looking at me for the quality I bring to a piece that I was working on, but rather, oh my gosh, look at her. What, she's so big. You know, she can look at how she, you know, look what she looks like from behind. Huh?
I'm so sorry
Sorry.
people made you feel that way.
Oh
That's
yeah, they. Mm-hmm.
horrible.
Yep.
I think we're all aware that it happens. I
Mm-hmm.
think too many people are not aware that they need to stop treating people of different sizes differently.
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
and what you were saying about uh, how people would just exclaim, "Oh, you lost a lot of weight." I wish
Yeah.
that in those sort of situations, people would instead focus on all the other things you've done with that time. Because in that case, you did. And I understand what you were saying about the other kinds of compliments about being beautiful and being a role model. But also, you spent 2 years working on that. You know,
Yeah.
it's not.
Nobody saw the way I had to do dietary changes. Nobody saw how hard it was medically for me, physically, and that what I had to go through to lose that weight. You know, all the doctor's appointments I had to go through, all the inner struggles I had every time all the anxiety I had every time I went near a scale. I mean, that's real. That's real, and it's still real right now to this day because it sticks with you. It doesn't leave you. Even as a smaller person now, I have such anxiety over the way I look. Even like this, you know, everything has to be just so, and that's horrible. You know, it really is. And but I am confident and act, and that's one of the reasons why I love acting, because it
Yeah.
takes me out of that. Acting takes me out of that. It does.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm just me. You know, what you see is what you get. That's what I tell people. I'm loud, I'm silly, I could be badass, I could be I'm sweet as sugar. You know, I love kids, I love animals. You know, people I'm not so good with, but that's great.
Yeah, but the point is, you're human, right? You're a
I'm
person,
human.
so much
Yeah,
more than some
yeah,
number on a scale or
yeah,
whatever size your body is.
yeah.
Like you're a
More than
mom,
that.
you're an actress, you were a teacher for years, you
Yeah,
were a
yeah.
business owner, you
Yes.
have had so many adventures, you've traveled, you have done things with your life.
Exactly. But isn't it funny how people will not look at that? They will just look at the shell of
Right.
a person and judge you by what you look like, not what you just said. The fact that I was a successful business owner, I was a successful teacher, I've traveled the world, and I've raised two beautiful children, you know, single-handedly. Um, it, Nobody looks at that. You know, I was able to take care of two elderly parents as well when they got older, and unfortunately, you know, passed away from both the same illness. And but I was there for them. Yeah, nobody sees that, and that's very sad. Is how we are so superficial as humans.
Yeah.
It's terrible, and I think that speaks to the book a lot. Also, is that you know, she was very self-conscious about herself because of her lip.
Yeah.
You know, she'd go to hide it because it was there. And was she going to be judged on that? Obviously she wasn't, because, you know, someone fell in love with her, which was wonderful, and she did get married. But for a very good portion of her life, you know, that lip just bothered her.
Yeah, and there were lots of boys who didn't ask her out. Like
Exactly.
there was that line about how she didn't get asked out to the prom, for
Right.
instance. Um,
Right.
yeah, because they're
Which
ah,
leads me to ask,
yeah.
did she marry this man because she felt that she'd have no other
Yeah,
choices?
so that I mean
Other, you know, opportunities? Did she feel that about herself, that, well, this guy wants to marry me, so I'm going to marry him because he asked me, because who knows, nobody else might. Did she have that in her head?
Yeah, I mean, when I was writing it, it was definitely something that went through my head, that
Oh,
she did feel a certain desperation, a certain amount of pressure, because it also goes back to what we were talking about before, like not being able to ask for what you want in the bedroom because you feel like you don't deserve it, like you're worthless. Well, for a lot of women, just having somebody accept them like that,
Right.
that's enough. Or at
Right.
least they think, they have been raised to believe that should be enough.
Right.
Oh, someone loves me, somebody asked me to marry him, okay, this should be the end, instead of questioning what comes after that. Right, because the fairy tale has only just begun.
Yeah, the fairy tale ends once you take the white dress off, and it's just so funny. Because going back to now, if we can we go back to the poems? Can we speak about the poems a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's talk about the poems. So the book, my dear listeners, opens with 5 poems, and they each relate to the story in some way, but they're not necessarily about Naomi in a literal way. She's not necessarily the character or narrator in each of those poems. They're poems about being a girl, being raised in purity culture, dealing with sexual abuse, dealing with ideas about what a slut is, what women are not allowed to do, stuff like that. Yeah, what do you want to say?
Well, I think we had this conversation the other day when I was speaking to you about how, what was your reasoning for choosing the cover of the book with the wedding dresses? And the wedding dress flies in the face of what is being said in these poems, because once that white wedding dress comes off, all bets are off. And in the fact that the poems describe women in such a oh God, what's the word I want to use?
I've been told they're
in an oppressive way. Women are, the poems describe the mere sheer act of having a vagina as being oppressed from the moment you take your first breath on this earth. All right, we're all in pink. We're defined. Pink, we're a girl. Blue, you're a boy. And those roles, from the moment you come out of the womb, are, there you go. It's not like right Twix and left Twix. You know what I'm saying? It's not the same. It's not the same, simply by nurture of your sex.
Yeah, way to
and then
the line in the poem. Yeah.
Yes. And then the wedding dress. It just kind of flies in the face of impurity. We wear white on our wedding day to show that, to have an air of purity, because that's what marriage is supposed to be about. It's like baptism. When a baby is baptized, they're pure and innocent. Well, yes, they are, because they haven't experienced anything other than taking their first breaths and maybe having their diaper changed. But by the time you are a woman ready to marry, and every woman looks forward to putting on that white dress, and I have to ask myself, and they're beautiful, but and I love them too. I love putting my daughter in one. But I'm like, why haven't norms changed for that? I mean, I guess it's personal choice also. A woman can choose to get married in white or not, but why has white? Well, now they come in different colors. There are wedding dresses that come in. Yes.
It was such a big deal when Jessica Parker wore a black wedding dress that was like all over the magazines.
Right.
People were just so shocked that she had full choice.
Yes, but because why? And it's funny because it's the connotations of purity, but how pure are we really? going into
Right.
that covenant, going into that pact. How pure are we?
Yeah, I mean, there's this gross association with childhood because the wedding dress is so similar to a little girl's dress in many ways, or
Right?
the baptismal dress, the christening gown,
Yeah.
which is also a little white dress.
Also, communion.
Communion, exactly. All these little white dresses that
If
children
you are
wear.
Catholic, the sacrament of communion,
Right.
all sacrament, this is all in, okay, based on religion.
Yeah, and right. So even people who were not raised in the Christian faith, if they come from a Western culture, they're probably going to wear a white dress. Even, I mean, Jewish girls wear white dresses. Some
Exactly.
of them will wear blue. I have seen that, but
Right.
it's still the norm in Western mainstream
Is
society
white.
is a white wedding dress.
You could have been the madam of
A brothel,
of an escort service, a brothel. You could have been one of the girls in the brothel, and you still, it doesn't matter. You could have just been turning tricks the night before, but you're going to get married in a white dress.
Yeah, no, it is weird. But but like you said, they're beautiful. We've been conditioned to love these dresses, to
Exactly.
fantasize about them since
Yeah.
we're little. And
Yes.
fashion magazines.
We fantasize about them. That's what it is. It's a fantasy. It's the fantasy. We want to live that fantasy. You just said it.
Yeah.
You just said it.
Yeah, no, and it grosses me out.
Okay? We are, it's the fantasy that we're in love with, because we know that marriage is not a fantasy, it's a real thing.
Well, we should know, right?
Yes, but we're not, unless you have parents or role models who are going to set it to you straight, who are going to keep it real for you.
Yeah.
And let you know that it's not going to be, it's not going to be freaking Cinderella. I'm sorry. No guy's going to put a glass slipper on your foot and take care of you. We take care of ourselves as women. We need to take care of ourselves as women. Even married women need to take care of themselves physically, emotionally, mentally. You need to take care of yourself, because at a moment's notice, nothing is promised. That spouse could be out the door or unfortunately dead and buried in a heartbeat. And then you are left with no one but yourself. And there are so many, and I've seen it so many times.
Yeah.
I've seen so many young women, older women, who lose their husbands by either divorce. I don't know what's worse, being a widow or being divorced. But at least if you're divorced, you could still ask questions and you could still bargain and argue. But there are so many women my age who've lost their husbands, who depended on their husbands their whole life for everything and trusted them with everything. And then they're gone. And that's when they find out, I didn't know I had a second mortgage on the house.
Oh.
I didn't know that he took these loans or he made these bad business deals, and now I owe all these partners. I didn't know that my credit cards were run up. They were maxed out. I didn't even know I had these credit cards.
Terrible.
I didn't know he had a mistress. I mean, it's happened.
Right. Yeah, finding out about that little apartment in the city. What's that about?
That's what I'm saying, is that instead of, and again, it goes back to, religious beliefs and how you're raised. I remember, I don't know, when I got married in the Catholic Church. We had to go to what was pre-Cana, if you're familiar with that. It was counseling by a priest. Now, it's what we did. But I'm sorry, what does a priest know about marriage? They're not allowed to get married. Seriously, they're married to the church. So what do they know about being in a relationship, a partnership? Even business deals go sour and they dissolve their partnerships, right?
Yeah.
Marriages, yes, it's based on love, but it's also business. And nobody ever tells people the business end of it. We explain it as being this wonderful rite of passage in your life that now, it's amazing. Most people now And I applaud this. Don't get married for those very reasons, that they don't feel the need to. And I kind of get it now, but it took me this long to get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they just get married later. That's
Yes,
what would have traditionally been acceptable. I mean, it used to
exactly.
be you were a spinster by the time you were 30, right?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Someone had
even,
married you.
yeah, well, here's the thing. When I was in high school, and I graduated high school in 79, when I graduated high school, there were girls already with engagement rings on their fingers at 18. Yeah, because that was what the norm was during that time period. You
Yeah.
got married, or you went to secretarial school, or yeah, right, you went to college, but very rarely did you go to a four-year college. Maybe you did. It depended on what family. Again, it was different, family values, I guess. Um, but it wasn't the norm. Whereas now, you know, I had two kids by 25. There are 25-year-olds still living in their parents' house who don't even have a job. And
Oh yeah, for sure. When I was in grad school,
yeah.
most of the undergraduates in the class I TA'd for were actually 24, 25.
See?
Many of them were I was at City College of New York, so CUNY system, a lot of people go to school part-time, they live with their
Yep.
parents because the
Yeah.
city is very expensive. And yeah, but they're 25, they might still be working a retail job, you
Exactly.
know?
Exactly. Exactly. Getting back to the sexuality part, and the roles of women and girls, and I think it affects, again, lack of communication or lack of support or having a proper role model can lead girls down the wrong path. And I think that's where we also see a lot of teen pregnancies going on, where these young girls are getting pregnant and they think that, well, nobody else loved me enough. My baby's going to love me. I have somebody who's going to love me now, or he loved me and I'm going to have his baby. It's
Yeah.
sad.
No, I mean, there are all sorts of outcomes for just not giving girls enough information
Thank you.
when
Exactly.
they're young. And some girls will be pressured at a young age to do things that maybe emotionally they're not ready to do yet and
Right.
get pregnant. Or maybe they are emotionally ready, but no one ever taught them about birth control or gave them access to it.
And then it's too late because they don't have the education. They're afraid to ask for fear of being admonished, punished.
Yeah, either way, whether you have a kid in high school or you're a virgin till marriage, you get a raw deal just for being a girl.
Yeah, you really do. You really do.
I
You
mean,
really do.
yeah, of course there are happy, well-adjusted women out there, but it just is not the same for us as for boys. It just is not. Because
And then,
even if you have parents who are incredibly understanding and progressive and they're up on all the latest literature and make things as accessible to you as possible, you're still going to have to deal with teachers and down the road employers,
yeah,
people in the community, just
yeah,
anyone, all kinds of people who are going to view you a certain way because you are a girl, you're a young woman.
I, yeah, yeah. And you have to fight so much more. Although I have to say that as of late, there are very strong women role models. I mean, look, we
Yeah,
have a woman vice president now. When did we ever think that would ever happen? I think the tide is turning,
right.
which is wonderful. We have women in many different roles. And we have, in the Supreme Court and, in government, it's great. And teachers and in the medical field, where those occupations and those career choices were only offered to men. At one point in my generation, there weren't as many women accepted to medical school as there is now. There weren't as many women accepted to law school as there is now. They had to fight and scratch to get a spot at a covenant, a really prominent university, that covenant spot.
Yeah.
Most of the time it was given to a male. And then if it was offered to a female, it was because, okay, you're going to be our token. We just to make them, the men, the boys feel better. We're gonna admit that token woman just to say, well, look, we've got a woman student. Am I wrong?
No, not at all. Not at all. Dear listeners, that is all the time we have. I am going to drop links to some of the other projects that Donna is working on now, so you can follow her, find out about her on her website, check her out on Facebook, maybe drop in on a Zoom reading. All sorts of things are going on. This is a busy lady, and we just focused on one of her many projects happening now and happening in the near future. So thank you, Donna.
Oh, you're welcome.
And
Thank you all out there.
Thank you, listeners, for choosing the Badass Lady Folk podcast. I know you all have so many choices for your podcast and other entertainment, especially now, more than ever in the history of mankind or humankind.
Yeah.
I'm your host, Christine Sloan Stoddard, and you can find out more about me and Quail Bell Press and Productions in the show notes. Tune in next time.